Something worked. Here in the crossfire, two members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the committee's chairman, Democratic Robert Menendez, supports a strike, and Republican Senator Rand Paul opposes a military strike. Senator Paul, the first question to you. Why do you think the Russians came forward today after being so obstructive in the United Nations Security Council for so long?
You know, I think anytime diplomacy is possible, it's preferable to war. And so I think it's a great development, that this is going forward. There have been discussions with the Russians for months. Really, I think on to a year now, there have been discussions with the Russians.
With no movement.
Well, but apparently the Russians have been in favor of some kind of negotiated settlement. Have they been completely there? How did they get there? Is the threat of force bringing them there? I think is unknown, but I think it's a good development. If the president needs to take credit on this for it to move forward and to avoid an all-out war in Syria, I say the more the better. I think war or bombing Assad will lead to more instability, and I think we're more likely to see chemical weapons get into the hands of terrorists if we destabilize Assad.
Well, I have to say that I'm cautiously looking at what the Russians are suggesting. We'll see. After 2 years in which the Russians have vetoed every effort at the United Nations, including simply recognizing that the use of chemical weapons in general is a violation of international law, without even ascribing blame at that point in time, they voted against that. They voted against a simple press release saying, applauding the opportunity for the United Nations to send inspectors in. So I'm somewhat cautiously, looking at this set of circumstances. But look, the only reason, if this is true, if the Russians are serious in their proposal, and more importantly, if the Syrians are actually going to give it up, and they can do that right away at the Security Council in the next day or two. Go right in there with a resolution that's very specific, that says all of the sites, unfettered UN access, the access not only to those weapons, but to get access throughout the country to determine the sites and be able to secure them. The only reason we might get there is because of the threat of a credible military force.
Given that threat, Senator Reid has apparently announced this evening that he's going to postpone the vote in the Senate. The whip count we've seen in the House is like 5-1 against. Do you think it would be wiser to slow things down and hold off on those kind of votes until we see whether or not, in fact, we can get the United Nations and the Russians to do something that's real and not just public relations?
Well, I'm going to defer to the majority leader in the Senate context to determine what's the best way to move forward, working in concert with the administration. If the administration believes that this is a serious effort by the Russians that will, in fact, be embraced by the Syrians and we can move forward, we can see that in very short order, then that is obviously a welcomed effort. But I truly believe that the only reason we are at this point is because the president said he had made a decision that, in fact, this was necessary, because the Senate Foreign Relations Committee moved forward in a bipartisan fashion, in a targeted fashion, to allow this to happen. I think the Russians said, this is a real potential consequence to our own interests as a result.
I agree with you. Senator Paul, what do you think about the delay in the vote?
Well, I think that it's a great way out for the president, because I think he would have been handed a rebuke. I think there's a very good chance that the House would vote against going into Syria. And then the real question is, would he abide by our verdict? Would he abide by the congressional verdict? Would he obey the Constitution and say, I've been told I don't have authority, therefore I can't do it? That's been an open question, because he hasn't really admitted that he would abide by it. Whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, in a way, I think it allows diplomacy a little more time to see if it can work this out. It won't get to what the president said he was going to do, which was to punish. He was going to punish Assad, but he was going to punish
getting rid
him.
of the chemical weapons,
Yeah.
I think, was the ultimate goal, to ensure that he was no longer a threat.
He was going to punish Assad by not attacking Assad, by leaving him in power.
Right, and send a message to Iran and North Korea that there are consequences. And the consequence here is you're going to give your chemical weapons over.
Right. I think it's a good idea to have the chemical weapons turned over to an international authority, so I'm not going to complain about a good thing. So I think it's something that maybe, even though I know this is supposed to be crossfire, maybe we can all agree that it would be a good idea not to bomb Syria. I think bombing of Syria leads to more instability in the Middle East, and so that's why I've been opposed to it. I think it makes it more likely that Israel will be attacked, more likely that Turkey will be attacked, more likely that more refugees will go into Jordan. All the bad things we've talked about are all more likely if you bomb Syria than if you don't bomb.
Well, actually, I think the resolution pretty much says that. This, in essence, would be a win. What did we say in our resolution? We said that this is to deter and degrade Assad's ability to be able to continue to deliver chemical weapons against innocent innocent civilians. In the last instance where he killed over 400 children. And for me, I look at these pictures and it shakes my conscience. And I'm reminded, I know the speaker is a great admirer of history, I'm reminded of what history has taught us when we do not act in circumstances such as this. And so I think that in essence, that's what the resolution called for. If they give it up in this way, we will have accomplished to a large degree in a better sense, because you can't deliver chemical weapons that you don't have access to anymore.
But if you-
I think that's a
Exactly.
positive thing. Now, you can continue to go ahead against Assad in war crimes, which I certainly think that we should, through the United Nations, pursue
But here's the problem.
Assad in terms as a war crime criminal, which I believe he is for what he's done to his citizens.
But here's the problem for the American people. I don't think anybody doubts that Assad is probably a war criminal, has done these horrific things to civilians. But on the other side, we've seen priests beheaded by the Islamic rebels on the other side. We've also seen an Islamic rebel eating the heart of a soldier. So it's not like there's no atrocity going on the other side, and al-Qaeda is on the other side. I can't conceive of how we would go in and be allies with al-Qaeda.
Well, let's.
I don't suggest that we're going to be
Exactly.
allies with al-Qaeda. There are vetted elements of the Syrian opposition that we believe
are allies with
which
al-Qaeda.
largely share,
No, they're not
which
allies with
largely would
al-Qaeda.
share our values. But at the end of the day, if you just sit back and say, you know what, there's no consequences to the use of chemical weapons, go kill another 1,400, go kill another 14,000. At what point does the consequences of those actions not only send a message in Syria, but globally? We want the Ayatollah in Iran to heed our message. Do not cross that line towards towards nuclear weapons. We want the dictator of North Korea to understand, do not cross a line as well. This is, I think, even beyond Assad. And if we can get the United Nations quickly to go ahead and intervene and actually obtain all of these chemical weapons, secure them and destroy them, then I think we will have made a very good statement.
But there's a real distinction between whatever happens in terms of the chemical weapons and the Syrian civil war. And all the evidence we're getting is that the country, by enormous numbers, something like 85%, is deeply opposed to the United States picking sides in the Syrian civil war, partly because, as Senator Paul said, there's this deep feeling that there's the bad guys and the bad guys.
Well, that's exactly why working with Senator Corker, the ranking Republican on the committee, and getting a universe that went from John McCain, who's very hawkish on these issues, to Dick Durbin, who's very dovish, generally speaking, on these issues, to find the balance. And what did we say? No American troops on the ground. We don't want to be engaged in that civil war.
Unless the chemical weapons break free.
And in fact, to be able to have a time limit in this regard of 60 days, which many would argue the president has under the War Powers Act anyhow, to be able to proceed. So it seems to me that what we've done here is not get involved. No one wants to get involved in serious civil war, but we may very well have stopped the slaughter and sent an international message that there's a consequence of
I agree.
use.
Senator Paul, I want to go back to...
The big exception to ground troops that Secretary Kerry admitted was if the chemical weapons were to come free and needed to be secured, we would need 75,000 troops to secure the weapons. That would be troops, boots on the ground. And the question is it more likely for that to happen if we destabilize Assad or less likely?
Right.
I think
And
more
I'm
likely if we
confused
bomb
about
Assad,
your
the chemical
policy.
weapons
At
could
the
become
committee
free.
hearing, I must say, at the committee hearing when he was pressed on this issue, starting with me and then Bob Corker, he said, look, let's close that door. No American troops on the ground. And I think the world understands that if chemical weapons caches are open and subjected to the possibility of terrorists getting them, that there would hopefully be an international effort to secure those chemical weapons so they don't come against us, our troops, our interests, and citizens.
And I think that we
The
would.
question is it more likely or less likely? If we destabilize Assad, is it more likely the chemical weapons will become free roaming and terrorists might get them, or less likely? I think it's more likely if we destabilize Assad that the chemical weapons may fall into the hands of al-Qaeda.
Well, okay, let's hold on a minute. In his interview with Wolf, President Obama also made a strong case for one thing, that is keeping our troops safe. You'll hear him make his case next, and I'll ask Senator Paul if he agrees.